We love to have a full house here at the Chapman, so I'm thrilled that we're able to fill most of these seats. My name is Rebecca Tvell. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator here at the Chapman Museum. And once again, we thank everyone for coming tonight for another lecture here at the Chapman Museum. So tonight we're actually excited to welcome back John Ellingsworth. He was actually here a number of years ago. I couldn't figure out when exactly, but a number of years ago he was here to give this presentation. And at that point, it was the presentation was given in association with an exhibition that the museum did on the fire. So we are thrilled that he's agreed to return and do the presentation a second time. So John is a retired assistant chief with the Glens Falls Fire Department. And tonight he's going to be discussing the major fires that swept through the city over the years and their impacts on history and also on the development of the city. And much of what John is going to be talking about tonight is also in a book called Alarm Box 33. If you're interested, we are selling it in the gift shop. Thank you to a very kind donation. So if you're interested, you can purchase a copy of that for $23.95 plus tax. And you can come see me, after the talk, and I'll be at the desk. And so now I will turn it over to John.
So I'll see you in a little bit.
All right.
Well, I'm glad to be back. Very thankful for the Chapman to give me another chance to do the presentation. This presentation, well, actually, let's see, introduce myself. I am a retired member of the Glens Falls Fire Department. This presentation really is based on going back to 2003. The Glens Falls Fire Department was celebrating its 100th year of coming into existence. It's been 100 years. So we obviously, for the fire department, it was a big event. I know we had a parade. The Chapman was kind enough to do a special exhibit. I'll participate in it. And at the time, also, what we decided we wanted to do is we wanted to write a book. To document not just 100 years, but also pre that, all the firefighting, the volunteers, all the way through the whole history of the settlement of Glens Falls. And we did a special edition of it, printed it out, sold them all quite readily. A nice hard copy, kind of a special event. Real briefly, here's another side of the title of Alarm Box 33. This refers to the fire alarm boxes, and this is not a very good picture of one of them. I'm sure those of you are old enough like I am, you remember the old fire alarm boxes. This is all pre-911. And when I first started with the city, they still had some of them around on there. And the old boxes, the original fire alarm boxes, what they basically did is they were hooked to the alarm station with electrical wires. And inside each box, they put a little cam that had a certain number of little pumps on it. And when somebody pulled the fire alarm box, the little cam would go off and it would send a signal to the firehouse, and either a bell would go off. They would count the number of bells because each box had a different cam in it. Or they also, some of them printed out little punched holes in the paper. And they would listen, the firemen would listen, and they'd count the rings. It'd go ding, 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 ding. Whatever the count was, they would count it. And then they would know. And then they would refer, this is another example of a fire alarm board. They would count the dings, or some of the ones had paper that punch holes in the paper. This would tell them where the box was located. Now, I know you can't all see up here. If you look down at the bottom, box 33 was Bank Square, which is right downtown. And that's where the title of this book comes from. The earliest fire alarm boxes, they told stories that they all knew box 33. That meant downtown. Box came in from downtown, that you could meant something serious. So yeah, that's kind of why this title box 33 came, which is a little side note. I mentioned we worked on a thing. I do want to mention a lot of people helped us from all around the area, region. We have now, in fact, I do want to mention JP Jones. He worked extensively on this information here. I did want to mention him specifically. And the thing that got me is, I got to be honest with you, when I started this, we're kind of wrapped up in the celebration. I wasn't really that much of a history buff, but I'll tell you, once I got involved in it, I really became very, very interested in particularly the people and the things like that, not necessarily all the big fires. And what I finally realized after put all this work into this book, what I finally realized is when you look at the history of fires in the city, they played major impacts in the development of the city. And obviously negative impacts. You lose something you think, but also sometimes in a kind of an unusual way, sometimes eventually indirectly had a positive impact. But bottom line is the development of the city and the growth of the city and the community before that really did follow the pattern of the history of the city. It really was closely intertwined. Now, the development of firefighting in Glens Falls is unique. I mean, I'm going back to the earliest settlers here. It followed pretty much the same pattern in those early days. firefighting was either you're living by yourself in a rural area, it was on your own, or it was kind of a community-based thing. You know, everybody kind of pitched together and worked together in it. And it was largely an individual responsibility. The impact was limited because it was kind of, unfortunately, if your cabin or home burned down, it's really kind of the result was kind of limited too. But as the communities grew and as they become more dense and more settled, it became more and more of a community obligation.
Yeah.
And over the years, it slowly grew. Now, Glens Falls between 1778 and 1780, it burned twice during the Revolutionary War. British troops came through during the war and it did burn down what was here for settlement. But as the settlement grew, the threat of fires increased. Following a fire at the end of Marble Company in 1834, the community's now the community's growing by this point in 1834. So we had a big fire. It was obviously at a industry starting to have more and more impacts. So the community decided, well, we need to address it a little more than just kind of haphazardly leaving it up to each person to figure out how to do it. So in 1835, they started a village committee to examine, once again, these early fire codes. They want to make sure people had safe stoves. They're looking at what are the causes of the fires. They wanted people to look at stoves and fireplace and make repairs. Households are required to have one or more fire buckets, you know, the old bucket brigades. Everybody was kind of, that's down this, you can see where it's starting to transfer over to the broader community. Everybody's being got, additional committees are formed to convey hooks and ladders and useful things to assist in saving household goods. And then by 1839, when the city incorporated as a village, or Glens Falls incorporated as a village, they actually started looking at public water supplies. Obviously, for firefighting, getting water is one of the most critical needs that we have. So they started to build public cisterns, large wells, smaller wells. So once again, located throughout the village, throughout the community, they had water sources they could go to get water and help it out the fire. So it's kind of the first steps in the organization of fire protection in the city. Now, as the community grew, once again, as the community grew and more buildings, even that really they felt wasn't quite enough. So they had to evolve into a more community-based organization, something really much more organized. Now, we just need some organized firefighting. So they started to build the volunteer fire departments. 1842, the first volunteer fire department was established with more than 9 other companies formed and merged over the next 60 years. Now, these were often started by very prominent citizens of the day. They would fund or host it. A lot of them were named after some of these products, some of these prominent citizens. They were often very political based. My understanding of it, if you were a politician, this was kind of a good thing to have your name to. They kind of became very competitive. And I've never heard many stories from here at Glens Falls, but I know from the volunteer fire departments around that they became so competitive that sometimes even to the point that they would try to race each other to the fire to be there first. Sometimes even in the sense that they would cheat and maybe kind of disrupt somebody else's activities if no one got there first. It really was quite competitive. And they had mottos. A lot of them had mottos, like their motto of the Cataract Engine Company was able and willing. Now, if you notice, you see the little speaker horn you have there? That's a ceremonial one they do, but that's for the officer. They didn't have radios or PAs. That's how they would yell out the commands. Even today in the fire service, some of the the officers will have those little bugles, those little horns across their symbol. That's where that comes from. But this would have been, I'm sure, probably a ceremonial type thing. That horn you see there is for the purposes of yelling out commands and things like that. Now, this pumper was taken behind the Glens Falls Hotel, which we'll talk about a little bit more. That kind of plays a prominent role. Now, like I said, the early days, they started volunteer firemen. That's still across the United States. That's the primary way of delivering fire service. 85% of the fire service around the country is provided by volunteer departments. And I'll describe this, what they're standing in front of is a fire pumper.
Now, did they?
Things like that. Now, this is an example of one of the early fire pumpers. This one's taken from the Ridge Street station, this Ridge Street station I'm talking about was next to City Hall. It's the parking lot next to City Hall now. Right. I've got pictures of the Ridge Street station. It was originally purchased in 1862 for $1,300, and it was considered state of the art for the day. You notice the way it worked. This was all hand pulled to the fire. They would bolt. There was ropes that would come out the front. They would actually pull it to the fire. And these things on the side are folded up, and those are called brakes. They would fold down the side. You have up to 60 men, and they would actually sit there on alternate sides of pump. And then you would put this big black hose would go in with a suction hose would go into a water source. And they actually be surprised they can pump quite a bit of water. And, you know, there's a picture later on. I'll show you where they.
Where would they get in water?
Here's an example of now remember I said how competitive they were? They would actually get together, they would actually have a contest to see who could throw the water the farthest, because you gotta remember these are hand powered. This is an example right downtown. This is Warren Street going down this way. This is going up Ridge Street. There's the old Ridge Street station right there, that tower right there. And it's kind of hard to see, but do you see the water stream?
Yeah. Yeah.
This was on 4th of July. They were actually would have competitions, and you would draw fire departments from all around the region would come. And big events, large cash prizes awarded the engine that could throw the stream the farthest. And like I said, many of these buildings are still, none of these buildings here, that's the Burger King side right now. But these buildings are all still there. Those are all still there. There's an example, that's the fountain there. I'm sure that one also duplicated the cistern for water. They needed to do it. Just another example of the different volunteer department. Like I said, I think there was over 9 altogether as over the years. They kind of came and went. This is James down hook and ladder, obviously taken right in front of the monument. This would be Crandall or City Park right now, behind him right there. But you see the ropes coming out?
Yeah.
That's how they would actually pull. They would actually pull it to the thing. Those are all ladders on there. How they would carry the ladders. And you can see once again, there's the office in the front with this horn. Here's an example of a couple more. Now this is part of the old Ridge Street station. This was next to City Hall. This building right here. This would be City Hall right now.
Be the second one.
And now once again, they're not always fight for fun. So, and you can see how they all have names of prominent people in the area. I mean, little. Notice the a lot of this would have been, you know, just after the Civil War. On the Civil War, you know, it's kind of very militaristic. You can see very similarities in that there. But obviously, a lot of pride, which is understandable. A lot of pride, a lot of in their groups, their organizations. So that's how it kind of, like I said, over the years, from the earliest days of settlement, built up more and more. So things continue, and the volunteers, you know, were obviously very active, but of course the cities continue to grow, bigger and bigger buildings, and getting more and more. So this continued to about 1864. Now this map that I got on here is probably not right from 1864. It was the oldest one when I was making this up that I could find to kind of give you a rough idea. I just wanted to give you an idea of where we're talking about. You can see on there, you can see on there. That red dot, I kind of jumped ahead here. That red dot is the Glens Falls, the old Glens Falls Hotel. And that's right with the traffic circle is now. And so on that day, on the fire started in the Glens Falls Hotel, around 3 o'clock, flames of smoke were seen coming from the hotel's kitchen. We started a newly installed kitchen stove.
Yeah.
Now by 6 o'clock, the village center was described as a vivid flame. Volunteer firefighters attempted to control the 2 hand pumpers, but were hindered by a lack of water and high winds. Even the assistants from Sandy Hill and Fort Edwards were weak before they fully extinguished the fire. And this is an example of how far the fire, that area that I kind of shaded in red is an example of how much it destroyed. So you can imagine, like I said, I think there's probably more buildings in this map, but you can see how devastating that was to the city.
Yeah.
Now the fact that they called other communities was still common today in volunteer department. Actually, all fire departments are called mutual aid. We call it today. It's not uncommon, but you've also got a picture calling from Sandy Hill or Fort Edward stuff. You can imagine how long it took to get here.
Yeah.
There's even stories of them coming up on the train, loading equipment on a train and trying to get here as fast as they can.
Wow.
But I can't fathom this day and age having the hand pumpers with the limited amount of water they had. You can see why it was. And now they're also fighting high winds. You can see how, once it gets ahead of them, there wasn't going to be much stopping it. But you can just imagine how devastating that was. And this is what was left after. These are pictures that were taken after the fire. Destroyed 3/4 of a century development, 112 buildings, with only 3 left standing in the village center. Destroyed 3 churches, 2 banks, 2 firehouses, 60 stores, several homes. About $15.5 million in today's dollars lost. So you can just imagine, absolutely devastating to the city. So, obviously following this, a prompted discussion for improved water supply, they realized, hey, these are denser buildings, they're bigger buildings, this is what can happen if it's spread. The Wilkie Reservoir was installed in 1873, and improved development. And the first time they actually used it, that's part of the water system we have today. The pressure was so high, they talked about the firemen not being able to control the hoses, they weren't used to that much pressure. They actually got the water system.
Was that gravity fed?
Yeah, originally it was gravity, it's still today, the primary gravity fed, it's one water tank up by aviation mall, but it was primarily, when I started the fire department, still gravity fed. So obviously new construction to rebuild the village. Many of the buildings we see downtown today were rebuilt after this fire. So now that was 1864, so now we continue ahead. Oh yeah. Now 1884. We started the second Great Fire. Now this is looking down Warren Street. This will be about where Burger King is now. The Civic Center will be down this way. It started in the Union Hall at the top of Glens Street Hill. We're working it out. It began in the first permanent building built after the 1864 fire. First building they built. It started at 6 o'clock. They fought to contain the fire, but even with help from Sandy Hill, once again calling in help, they were unable to fire spread east. It destroyed 12 buildings, left 30 people homeless. Destroyed 2 opera houses. One they referred to as the Little Opera House. The Glens Falls Opera House, which was down there, was built in 1871. It was seated 1,600 people, considered the village's premier building a showcase. The Presbyterian Church, which was once again rebuilt after the 1864 fire. Now it said that the steeple of the Presbyterian Church clapped just as the bell clock was striking 9. The fire was struck at 9 o'clock. And also several saloons they apparently had time to refer to as murderers row. I'm guessing maybe one of the areas in the city wasn't quite so and the losses were, and once again, you can just see the devastation of it there. The losses estimated at, well, $6.5 million by today's dollars. So now once again, and it's not a criticism, it's just a reality. They realize we need to work on some more stuff here. We need to start doing some additional improvements. So one of the things they decided to do is, I remember they're still using hand pumpers, they bought a Chapman Jones steamer. Now these obviously, this is very, very, very heavy. That used, basically they would build steam engine in there, and that's what they would use to pump the water instead of everything. Very, very heavy. Obviously they got to start using horses there at this point. They also bought an actual ladder truck, horse-drawn ladder truck. Because they decided this one was kind of spring loaded, it would help them assist to get up there. And they also put the first fire alarm box system in the city to try to, once again, see if we can speed up people being notified of fires. Back before telephones and all modern things, very often delay in letting firefighters know there's a fire.
Are they still volunteer at this point?
Yeah. They had to keep horses. I'll show you the Broad Street station picture of an old South Street station. Firefighters, that building was still open. They worked there before they closed it, built the new Broadway. They said they could still up the whole time before they were embedded in the thing about the work. Somebody have a question?
Yeah, John, did they keep a little fire in the steamer all the time?
I'm not sure, but I know that was part of it. You had to go to steam. I'm not sure exactly. I think maybe in the early days they did. I'm not sure so much later when they haven't just.
That's right.
I don't think they would have at that point. So once again, they started making some improvements. And then we get up to 1902, and this is what they refer to as the third Great Fire. And interesting enough, they're about every 20 years apart. Okay, I did think. So now we're looking at, I kind of tried to prove a little bit of a contrast there. These are actually a little confusing, because we're looking at 2 different directions. But we're looking down Glen Street there. This is the aftermath of fire. So it started in the Webbs Brothers clothing store and spread, eventually destroying 5 3- and 4-story buildings consisting of 16 businesses. Sparks spread great distance. The homeowners had to wet the roof. There were told stories that the heat was so intense, and this would have been about the area from Exchange Street, where Davis is, working your way down to about, where the street goes into the parking lot. Down almost to the bank, it would have been this section of the street that burned. They talk about the fire being so hot, it was breaking windows, the heat was 10 feet, heat was breaking windows on the other side of Glen Street.
Wow.
And once again, some aftermath of pictures. In today's dollars, $18.5 million loss is the second most damaging fire in the village's history. 16 businesses, including the Follow Collar and Shirt Factory, discontinued business, placing 800 people out of work. Now, you can just imagine the community, how devastating, even today, how devastating it is.
Yeah.
They literally lost a huge manufacturer. Rebuild after this was the 5-story Coleman building, which is still downtown. That building is still there. And the BB Fowler building is still there. Those were built after that thing. Now, after following this fire, understandably so, insurance companies were going to raise fire rates 25%. Once again, over a period of time. And they actually, insurance companies, and it's interesting, I know when we did the book, I think somebody from the Medivere family donated a bunch of newspaper clippings from this era right around this time. And it's interesting, all the stories were the paper about, but they clipped all the stories about the fire department about. Insurance companies were basically demanding, you gotta do something. You gotta go prove it. To do it. So following the 1902 fire, and then in response to the insurance companies, the loss, like I said, there was a lot of debate in the papers. I know those little clippings, there was a lot of debates. In those days, the newspapers were very political. They each had sides and stuff. A lot of debate where but they did start a full-time paint department. $10,000 approved for the paint department. The volunteer departments were disbanded, and 9 uniformed firemen and 24 callmen. Callmen are people that were employees, but they would only be called in when they were needed. Believe it or not, the duty shift consisted of 10 days straight, followed by 1 day off. The men were allowed 1 hour off for breakfast and dinner. This schedule stayed in place until 1926. What we're looking at here is the old Ridge Street station. And once again, with City Hall is right here today. This is the parking lot next to City Hall there. And you can see where the stolen horse there. There's the Clapton Jones steamer.
Is that a bell tower on top for announcing a fire?
I believe that right. It's also a watchtower. Once again, we had call boxes by now, but they were still trying to do it. And this station dates back quite a ways, so it's probably before that. So they built the career department. They started their first paint department. That's what we did in 2003. That was our 100-year anniversary of the career department. They also had a station over on South Street. You can see the same thing there. That's the Hotel Madden. Now that building is actually still there today. Now, if you look, you see the windows there. You can just still see right there. Now that's how they had a front built on it. Of course, the Madden's gone now. That's Glens Falls National Bank, or actually, excuse me, what is it now? Arrow. It's still been fun. Who holds the card from it? That's the South Street station, and the basic frame of that building is still there today. This photo was taken about 1908. So eventually, they closed the South Street station. They built what at the time was West Street. We call it Broad Street today. And they built Broad Street. This was across from the old St. Alphonsus Church. Sure. That's the one that when I first joined the department, the guys that worked in this building before they built the new Broad Street station talk about the oats coming through the floor. You can still do for they had the oats for the horses and stuff like that.
I remember that.
Yep. This was replaced by the present day Broad Street station we have today in 1972. And actually, here's another picture. This was now once again things continue to move. Times change. This is the first introduction of the motorized equipment. This was really, I don't think used very long. It was kind of the first introduction. See, they're still using this is the transition over to motor vehicle. This was, I think before. And here's a picture of those of you who remember the Rialto.
Oh my
On
God.
Warren Street.
Wow.
Fortunately, 1925. This is what it looked like, and of course, obviously, fires are always, especially during the daytime, always get a lot of attention.
And they rebuilt.
And this is another continuing. If you notice the dates, once again, 1925. This continues a curious pattern of fires occurring, major fires about every 2 decades, which I don't think means anything, but it's just interesting. About every 2 decades, starting with the first of the 3 great fires, this continued the pattern. Your Sunday morning was caused heavy damage throughout the building. Fire was discovered by a workman in the storage closet on their building. Combustible storage, close to heating source. Once again, several area departments came, including even Saratoga. And like I said, they would actually load equipment on a train cars, trying to get up here. It obviously attracted a large crowd. These are some more pictures. See there of the fire. The paper noticed, the local papers noticed the fast response by motorized equipment. They made comment in their stories that how much quicker you were able to get the motorized equipment. The theater was saved and reopened 3 months later, which is really kind of hard to believe for looking at these pictures. I gotta give them credit for, I don't know if I want to be that guy up at the top here. We wouldn't quite do that today. Quite that way. Unfortunately, the building was torn down. To be old enough to remember the building. Now, once again, you're seeing taller buildings. You can see what they're doing there, trying to get to the ground. And actually, after this fire, this was the old Babcock and aerial ladder, the horse-drawn one. They finally decided, the city decided we needed to replace the horse and buggy ladder truck with the motorized equipment. Because once again, this was hauled by hand, and actually it took about 12 minutes, 15 minutes to get there. There was a sprinting system. You had to crank everything. You had to crank everything by hand and stuff. So the city decided to invest in a new way. They actually motorized area. Now, this is Fitzgerald's Hotel. This was down on Warren Street, down towards the Civic Center. On the same side of the street as the Civic Center, down the hill, not the 1 Street Hill. It was one of the oldest structures at Glens Falls. And since 1888, this Fitzgerald Hotel has been located in frequent places throughout the city. It hosted many famous dignitaries, including the governors Franklin D. Roosevelt, Alfred D. Smith. So it was really kind of a big prominent area, very landmark restaurant hotel of the city. Unfortunately, 1946, hotel guests were required to make dramatic escapes. 2 firefighters were injured. The top 2 floors were gutted. Major water damage below on the lower floors. About $1 million worth of damage in today's thing. And unfortunately, once again, it was torn down for renewal. But you can see there's the motorized aerial truck. Actually, I'm really looking at that picture. I'm surprised they're able to save the building. So this was the Rockwell House. Now this was built right where the Glens Falls Hotel was. Remember that first major fire we had in 1864? This is what was built after it. And it was quite a major, opened in 1872, becoming the largest hotel in the area, one of the city's best known buildings, by the many celebration. Exact same location where the Glens Falls Hotel was built after that. And it operated until the 1920s. It was renamed Hotel Rockwell. You can see this is kind of different pictures I found of different eras going back to horse days. That's missing in the new age. Unfortunately, in 1950, fire started it, and it was 78 years to the day the building opened. Just by sheer coincidence, it was exactly what. Started at 4 a.m. by a reported hair of smoker. It spread quickly, and several people literally hanging out the windows had to be rescued by firefighters. Yeah. There were several injuries, but no deaths. And this is where somebody just mentioned the. Now you can see there that burnt the whole roof off. The whole roof's gone right there now. If you notice that these ladders were wooden. These were all made out of not today. They were made out of metal today. These were wooden ladders. You can see a little bit of a problem they had up there. They actually heat that fire actually caused it to burn. Now they would never do this today, but their solution to the problem, they got back to the firehouse, they cut the top 10 feet of it off and continued to use it. I think they would yeah, I think they would. This is the day after. Obviously, for the time of year, a lot of cold night. When I first started the fire department, there was a lot of the guys there fought in the fire. They told lots of stories and stuff. You can just see the ice, the damage. This was the morning after. Now, obviously, granite was next. those of you remember, Grants was there, they built Grant, that's what I remember. The Grant store, and of course today, that's what it looks like today in traffic, that's that gap right there.
That's what they're.
But just kind of an interesting coincidence is that major fires that happen in that exact spot. That exact spot, also looks like today. Now we have St. Alphonsus Church.
Yeah, the old church.
The old church, this was across from the old Broad Street station or Westwood station, called originally.
That's Richard.
And then they had a, it was obviously, the church, like I said, very marble base, which is just won first place in the 1898 World's Fair, marble altar. See some of the pictures from the inside of it. Unfortunately, in 1955, fire started. The parish was getting ready to celebrate its 100th anniversary in September. I believe it started in a manger set for the holidays. The parish priest attempted to control the fire, but they ran across, remember the station was right across the street.
Right.
They ran across the street to the fire department. Unfortunately, it spread rapidly. About $6 million in today's dollars and stained glass windows. There's a little to be salvaged from the church hall. And like I said, the impacts that a fire has on the community, obviously, can be very devastating. And to me, this is one of the biggest things. When you lose the church,
Yeah.
you could build another building. I don't know if you could build a building like this today. I imagine, well, they built Notre Dame in France. I suppose that theoretically could be done, but, finding the craftsmen and stuff that could be built on a building like this. Because you lose something like this, that's permanently gone for all practical purposes. There's more pictures of the aftermath. Like I said, just irreplaceable loss in the community. It's just we can't replace something like that. And of course, they built St. Alphonsus Church, replaced it, and eventually it still is today. It became just water.
No, it's a candy.
It's a candy.
Well, that's right. I got how big my presentation. It was nice that they were able to rebuild the church, but like I said, you lose the building. So then in 1956, Woolworth building, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, they're calling a rubber fire in the alley. Now this is next to, this would be the Woods Theater today. And next to it is Just Coffee, the old YMCA building. Called a rubber fire around 7:30 at night. Fire rapidly spread to the Woolworth building. There was an explosion, the north wall collapsed, starting to spread to the YMCA building.
Wow.
So once again, like I said, that's. And it spread to the learner shop next door, clothing shop, here you can see the building, there's the old YMCA, today, coffee. It actually spread down, started to spread down, started to spread down the street. And then you show the aftermath. Over $500,000 damages, the Y suffered damage, more than 15 heavy smoke and water damage. You can see they actually got a crane there. You can see the back of the city hall right there.
Did they have to use the water from the pool?
No, I don't think they would have. No, I'm sure they used the hydrants like that. You can see the hose right there. The hose. So this is a picture of the remnants of fire. Now, when they rebuilt that, they built the Woolworth building next to it. And this is to me one of those examples where, after the tragedy and the devastation, they built the Woolworth building. So yeah, I remember this building would have been built, what, in the 50s or late 40s, 60s? I think they went with the actual. So it was relatively modern construction compared to most of the buildings. Relatively new construction. And what that actually allowed, when they decided to redo it to the Woods Theater, because it was a more modern building, they had a lot of steel and metal. Code-wise, it lended itself much easier. When I say easy, it wasn't easy for them, but I'm just saying, I don't know if you could have renovated one of those old buildings in that modern building codes. Yet this building did, because it was newer, did allow it to be renovated and brought up to modern codes, so they could actually put the theater there. So this is one of those unusual situations where if there hadn't been the fire, the old building was still there. I'm not sure if the Woods Theater would be there today. They might need another building. They probably wouldn't be that building, because I don't think they could have renovated the old building. But today is doubtless the Woods Theater, which is, quite an asset to the community. And then the Weir and Haskell Company was put down on Haskell Avenue. It was originally built in 1893. It was Haskell Avenue, just north of the Warren, by the railroad tracks. And they manufactured women's shirt waist, blouses, and men's shirts. I got a little ad there, kind of I give 800 workers, and it closed in 1915. Unfortunately, October 12th, 61, by the time they got there, the third floor was fully involved, quickly spread. These old mill buildings, they were built with some certain fire protection features in them, but you gotta remember, they're all entirely wood. They quickly spread to the rest of the floor. It was an arson fire. It was intentionally started. And curious enough, this was a continuation of all those other fires we talked about.
Yeah.
Columbus Day, Fitzgerald fire was on the 4th of July, the hotel fire was on Washington's birthday. And Woolworth was on St. Patrick's Day. This kind of continued this was Columbus Day.
Did you just say this was arson?
Yes.
Were the other ones arson?
No. This one was up, they did arrest somebody for it. I think somebody that, some mental health issues. They were.
Okay, this is
But believe it or not, there's a picture, and this is not uncommon, and I'm not trying to say everybody like this, but there is a picture of the person, press picture of the person, the crowd of people watching this fire. He's the one that set the fire. He didn't know that till after. He didn't know that till after. And you can just see the. I can't imagine pulling up in this fire either myself. I can't imagine. I don't know where you even think about starting. Wow. And this is across the street. This is some of the damage you get across the street. 3 homes are destroyed.
Got that close to the
Well, they had the heat. Believe it or not, this is just the heat. They had to wet down the houses across the street because curtains inside closed glass windows were catching on fire. The heat was radiating so intense, it was radiating through the glass, catching curtains on fire inside the houses. And there was a firefighter I worked with, George Moses. The story he tells, this was his, like his second or his third shift as a brand new firefighter. And they worked 24-hour shifts back then. He went to work and come home for like 4 days. That's how long they were trying to do all that. The loss of another old mill building. And what's interesting today is those old mill buildings for a long time were considered kind of, what are you gonna do with them? These big old wooden buildings. Where this is unfortunate, losing a building like this, look at the old mill buildings around here today that we reuse. Troy Shirt, you know how that's been reused. Union Square down here on Hudson Avenue, you go to the mill, they actually added storage to that, but these are all old mill buildings now have seen a second life, so I can only imagine if that building was still there, that might be another possible project. So that is quite a loss. Now this is looking down Bay Street, and the old Glens Falls Insurance Company was right here. This is the Roger Building right here. That's where it's looking down Glen Street.
Yeah.
And May 23rd, 63, you look down there, that's what you would have seen. And I took that kind of in the same exact location. Of course, the old insurance company is still there on that day. This was a Crandall block fire. And this was right on the corner of South Street and Glen Street. It was on the south corner there. But I can remember the building still being there. It was a long time landmark. And it recently been purchased. This is where Glens Falls National Bank is right now, right in the same corner there. It had been just purchased by the bank, and they're actually demoing the building. They're actually knocking the building down and getting ready to demo it. Now, unfortunately, a cutter's torch, because they were using a torch to cut up steel parts, different than that, it started a fire. And even though they were demoing the building, it caused serious problems. The fire was threatening. The fire was threatening to spread down the street to the bank. The bank was Glens Falls National was right there. So the fire was threatening down the street. They were able to stop it. More than 200 firefighters and 12 fire departments responded. Once again, there's another example of calling in more help with it. Overwhelmed your department.
Just great.
And once again, you can see there's part of Glens Falls National Bank right where they remodeled the outside. You can see it out there. And of course, once again, being the daytime, you can see a huge dragging a huge crowd like that. Estimated over 2,000 people stayed in the evening to watch it, even when they put floodlights up. Things that came after. Unfortunately, after many big fires or tragedies, reevaluate. They did agree the mutual aid system had been reorganized in the area, and that helped a lot, able to get the new mutual aid system they worked on. And they also talked about improving radio. Now we're up to the air of modern radios. They talked about ways to try to improve radio communication. Everybody was kind of on different frequencies and stuff, so they talked about ways and they worked on ways of improving that. That's just another picture of it. You can see mine, give you a little orientation on it. Fire. And of course, this is what it looks like today.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, there, you can just see the corner of the library. Yeah. Of course, this is where the building itself is right there. Yeah. And the old dad, too. 1978, Ellingsworth Fire. Now this is Larak, yes. I couldn't think of this for a second. This is the Larak building. I just joined the department when we had this fire. This started originally, it was originally a carriage house of the Joel Lab estate. We had a very hard time finding this fire because it's been renovated over the years. So when they renovate, people tend to cover things over, put extra walls, stuff. So fire gets into hidden areas where we have trouble finding it. It was an arson fire, started by a woman, mental health issue, started in the trash can outside. We were actually able to save the building, and of course now it's been reused as and remodeled as Larak, which is, nice. Now this is the Glen Rose fire, Glen Rose Lodge fire at 1983. And believe it or not, there's the Chapman home. Yeah. Chapman Museum right there. This was a rooming house on there, originally built in 1888 by Jerome Finch, the son of Daniel Finch, the founder of Finch Prime. And it was converted to a rooming house in 1932. So it's been there a long time. Unfortunately, there were 3 fatalities. One who was brought out of a room by a resident but returned to the shoes, which is, I don't want to go into fire prevention tonight, but that's why we say never go back inside. Don't ever go back into a fire. Unfortunately, that poor gentleman, it was attributed to careless smoking. And you can see they're helping rescue one of the right. And today, that's where the building stood. And once again, obviously a tragedy. But interestingly enough, with that building not there, that's what allowed them to bring the carriage house forward. Forward. So, like I said, I'm not saying these fires are good, but you can see where opportunities are created that maybe wouldn't have been there if the fire hadn't happened. So sometimes some good things come out of it, but that's what allowed the Chapman to expand and bring the carriage house. I remember when they moved the whole carriage house forward. Then October 7th, 2000, and was built in the early 1900s, 12 apartments, 17 tenants, unfortunately 2 fatalities. Several tenants rescued by the first arriving crew. This is actually on Lawrence and Cherry. That's the booths. Right next to the booth is located right there. And you were able to save that. And the house behind it on Cherry suffered some exposure damage. We were able to save that house too. Several tenants rescued by the first arriving crew was started by an arsonist who was later convicted on murder and arson charges. And like I said, we were able to save, unfortunately, the building there was no safe in the building, but we were able to switch. Really, I gotta be honest with you, at the height of the fire, we didn't think we were gonna be able to save those buildings. This fire was so big, we were concerned about it spreading. But we were able to save both the house behind it and movies to the right of it. Now we're getting quite up right to the more modern era here. 2013, the Bullpen Bar. This is right down in Glen Street. The bar was open, and now the bar is on the first. At this time, the bar is on the first floor, and there's tenants in the apartments above it. The bar was open, and patrons of the police office helped tenants escape from the second, third floor apartments. The intense fire was caused by a tenant who was using medical oxygen while smoking. Which, fortunately, home oxygen therapies very common today, which is good. They've got a lot of new equipment that's small and portable. I unfortunately, by the time in the fire department, I saw a lot of that. And very, very hard to convince people how dangerous that is. Unfortunately, this is an example. The roof collapsed, the firefighters were able to contain the fire within only minor damage to adjacent occupied jewelry and common buildings. It did just start to spread to adjoining buildings, but we were able to use some of the older buildings downtown. But we were able to contain it there. Once again, several mutual aid companies. Luckily, the owners, there wasn't really much left in the inside, but they were able to, because we were able to save the basic rough structure. They really literally rebuilt the building, the whole inside of that building was all rebuilt. But luckily, we were able to, and we're able to spread it. And this is 5 and 7 Sherman Avenue, those, actually, this building is still there. Yeah, the Bemis place, constructed in 1890 by Dr. Edward Bemis. Nine specials invented a non-surgical treatment for vision, for vision. He went on to build and purchase several buildings and created the Bemis Sanitarium campus, which I guess if you was all inclusive, you became for treatment, it was a rooming house, treatment facility. Eventually, these were converted to the Sherman Square Apartments, 579, there's one little house.
Yeah, there was 3 of them.
Another little house right here, we have 579 Sherman. Fortunately, on May 8th, 2014, this is the back of the building. Back of the building had open porches that you can take stairs up to the back of the apartments. It was so intense that heat damaged the windows of the First Presbyterian Church more than 80 feet away. So you got to remember, where this person's standing, they're standing near the Presbyterian Church, looking towards the back of the building. It actually damaged the church's windows. So thanks. Several neighborhood buildings were evacuated. 2 tenants were arrested by firefighters. 4 people were injured. 25 people homeless. Was apartment buildings. Now these open back porches. He says it's kind of hard to explain, but these were all open porches. There were stairs going up to the apartments. Somebody was out in the back of one of those stairs. There was smoking. And this, and remember I mentioned earlier, over the years, going back to the early era fire. They try to improve equipment and firefighting techniques. The other thing that they try to do, and even more so in recent years, is let's change the fire code. So we try to control these or limit the damage. This is an example. They would never build a building like this today with all that open wood and all that open stairs in the back. As you can see what happens, it starts and it just, there's nothing to stop it from going right up through. And so, well, I certainly appreciate all the old buildings really cool. I love when people renovate them, but I don't like it so much as a firefighter, right? As a firefighter, because the old buildings cause a lot of problems. Now, when they're renovated, they're usually brought up to more modern standards. Try to put some things in, try to limit this type of thing. And the last one will give you a good example: 60 Snowder, Stain Street. Now, this was part of the Bemis building too. This is one of the buildings. This is over on kind of Kitty Corner, the other side of Glen. Yeah. It was built in 1895. It's also been part of the Bemis Sanitarium. It was apartments at the time. And initially, when they pulled in, there wasn't a lot of smoke from the outside. There wasn't a lot of what's going on. Unlike some of those fires they pulled up to, there was no doubt yet a fire. But unfortunately, what had happened is it spread up to what they referred to as the back loft. It's a small area above the attic area, kind of open area. Now, when they built buildings like this, because we didn't have modern heating and air conditioning, ventilation, many of these buildings were built with actual, there's buildings downtown that still have this. A lot of them are closed off, so you can't see it until they renovate the building. But there were actually shafts going up the middle of the building that allowed ventilation to get in. Ventilation mostly. There would be actual windows that would open up, so that was to try to allow ventilation. But unfortunately, those shafts, they're also like a wooden chimney. This is exactly what happened here. This building was equipped to go. Now, as they improved the building over the years, they used it to run electrical wires and plumbing. That made it real easy. Guys putting that stuff in, made it real easy because I don't drill through the floor though. So, but unfortunately, when the fire started, it actually spread all the way up to the thing, and that's where we actually first saw the fire, even though that's not exactly where it started. It was heavily damaged, and once again, I believe the utility problem. I think it was something to do with some of that electrical equipment that was placed in that chaseway. Unfortunately, it wasn't salvageable, and the building had to be torn down. And you can see here we had Queensbury Central down. I think our ladder truck was out of service at the time, but you can see once again, large fires, we rely on mutual aid. Farmers rely on each other to help out. If the fire exceeds your resources, then you rely on other people. But this unfortunately, like I said, old building, but unfortunately, it was too essentially damaged for it to be saved. I think that's it right there. So is there any questions or comments or anything like that?